Welcome to the Worth Knowing live stream. I'm Matt Robeson, and today we're looking at how a river of big money is quietly shaping your future, my future, and the world we live in. We're going to go inside who's buying influence and what they're doing with it, either to enrich themselves or to shape our work and our kids' safety and our national defense, or sometimes both. Later in the show, I'm going to be bringing on the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter from ProPublica, Cory Johnson, who's going to take us inside a treasure trove of documents that he and a team there meticulously assembled that reveals the hidden world of more than 1,500 Trump appointees who are steering billions of tax dollars to themselves and their cronies and shaping decisions across the federal government. It's a look at what certainly appears to be a pervasive web of self-dealing and corruption. But first, we're going to take a look at the most important sector in America, possibly the world, and the way that the biggest companies on earth are funneling money into politics to steer immensely consequential decisions about our future, and what a small but influential group is doing to even the playing field and fight back. I'm talking, of course, about artificial intelligence. Over the past year, the hazy predictions about what AI could do to our economy and our society and our brains has started to become very real. AI spending is dominating our economy to the extent that our economy is growing at all. It's doing so only because of investment in AI. More than half of stock market growth has come from just 7 tech giants who are making those investments. The demand for electricity for data centers is driving up electricity prices, and that's become a major factor in overall inflation. And more research is showing that AI is degrading our very ability to think. It may already be cutting into the job market for our youngest workers. And of course, all of these effects are beginning to bleed into politics. Mikey Sherrill's top campaign promise running for governor of New Jersey was to freeze electricity costs. The role of AI in choosing military targets has already been a major media story for months. And that river of money I spoke of is increasingly flowing into picking winners and losers in specific races on the basis of who's willing to impose some kind of regulation or safeguards on AI and who won't. Let's take a closer look at what's going on in this fight, what the stakes are, what's going on under the surface with Brad Carson, former Democratic congressman, former president of the University of Tulsa, former undersecretary of the U.S. Army, and current president of Americans for Responsible Innovation. Congressman, welcome.
Matt, an honor to be on with you today.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to have you. I remember you fondly from your time in Congress, which was too brief, although maybe it was just about enough for what a normal human being, and you are very much one, what a normal human being should be able to take. Take us inside this. What do we know about how much money big tech is spending right now to shape AI regulation? And what are they doing with that money?
So there are 2 big groups out there who are trying to really foreclose democratic debate. That's what this fight is all about. It's like, do we, the people, have a voice in what AI policy is going to look like? Or is it just a small cabal of people based in Silicon Valley who have views unlike what most of America holds and who want to control it for their benefit? And they have amassed a $200 million war chest in 2 separate $100 million efforts to try to make sure that they control the agenda. And so that's what's really at stake here. It's not even about a particular policy. It's about who's going to be in the room when the future of this very consequential technology is going to be decided.
Last week, the Trump administration proposed a national policy framework for artificial intelligence, including the preemption of state laws and a federal sandbox to exempt AI companies from federal regulations. The upshot is it effectively shields AI companies from liability under state and federal law. You said this is Mad Max for the AI industry. What did you mean?
When you hear a term like regulatory sandbox, we think of child's play. And people might think it's actually harmless. What that means when congressmen use it is an area where there are no laws at all. Basically, all the otherwise applicable regulations would be lifted. It's a sandbox where you can play around in it. Unfortunately, the consequences of AI are not child's play. They're going to affect all of us in all the ways you mentioned in kind of the lead up to our conversation. And so basically what they're proposing is a world where the states are preempted from acting on AI in any way. And the federal government, of course, has no laws around AI either. So you have a world where it is like Thunderdome, where it's like, may the strongest person with the most money and the most clout prevail. That isn't how a democracy should work. And that's what I'm trying to fight against.
It's funny to use the term sandbox because we are used to calling states the laboratories of democracy, the laboratories of regulatory and government innovation. We try to figure things out on the state level. That becomes a model. You're very familiar with this as a member of Congress. And you're also very familiar with industries saying, hey, we don't want to have to deal with lots of state regulations. That's confusing. It's cumbersome. It's costly for us. It means that our lawyers are well employed, but they mostly spend their time trying to navigate 50 different sets of regulations. Could you please give us a uniform set of federal standards here? Is that necessarily wrong per se? And is it being twisted in this case to essentially give the AI, the tech companies, free rein?
It's not wrong per se. But the American tradition is one of federalism, and federalism does have a cost. I live in Oklahoma. The rules here about everything from driving to alcohol purchase to how insurance works are very different than they're going to be in California or New York. And that has a cost to the businesses who are trying to navigate that. But we think the benefits far outweigh those costs in experimentation, in local habituation. These are things that federalism brings to us. And so I think there is a cost of federalism, but there are many benefits to it as well. But of course, one can make the case in something so important as artificial intelligence, such an instrument of national power, that maybe we should have a federal scheme. And there are examples of this in our history. But the issue is there has to be a comprehensive federal regulation. So you can't have this Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome approach, which they have adopted. It has to be a world where the federal government steps in and says, look, there should be like reasonable design requirements on this. You should be testing it to see whether it can create child pornography or perhaps a novel pathogen that will kill us all, or some kind of offensive cybersecurity threat that can take down the entire grid. You should test for those kinds of things. And if the federal government had a plan like that, you might be able to tell California or Oklahoma, hey, don't duplicate that. Don't be different than that. That would make sense. But they've never proposed that kind of comprehensive federal scheme. And so in many ways, what they're trying to do is create a world where there are no rules at all. That's why I call it Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Is the Trump administration proposal essentially what industry wants?
It is essentially what some of industry wants. To their credit, there are many people in the AI industry who agree with someone like me, who says this is an incredibly powerful technology. We should have rules on it. In fact, it was just a couple of years ago that people like Sam Altman were testifying before Congress about, please regulate us, he informed them. And the whole industry wanted this. Now with Trump in power, people like Sam Altman have changed their tune. But companies like Anthropic, another big maker of AI technology, Claude is their signature product, they're still very much a believer in this. So the industry's divided. But what you do have is like a few people around Mark Andreessen at A16Z, David Sachs, who's the AI and CyberZar formerly, and perhaps the people around OpenAI who do, in fact, want to control this and have no rules at all. And so I'm lucky that the industry is divided and Anthropic has stood their ground opposing those kinds of things.
I, of course, assume the worst because, I'm a Democrat. I'm a Jewish Democrat. I assume the worst about everything. I of course, assume the worst, and I assume that any Trump administration model policy or regulation or executive order is going to reflect the wishes of Peter Thiel and the dark Enlightenment, tech right establishment. So when I see a proposal like this come out, it suggests to me that they are trying to get ahead of state regulations. They're trying to get ahead of the kinds of constraints that, thoughtful people like the folks you mentioned might be trying to impose on the industry. They're clearly afraid of something here, the people who are whispering in the Trump administration's collective ear. What specifically are the tech companies, the people who are behind let's let the sandbox loose. Let's let the companies do whatever they want. What are they most afraid of? What changes for them if they lose this fight?
I think they're actually afraid of the American people. because right now you see a growing backlash to artificial intelligence across the country. That's seen in the data center fight, but it's beyond that as well. AI is not a popular technology. We poll Americans about this. And so I think they are worried about what's going to happen in the states, because the states are agile. The money doesn't control everything. They can actually pass legislation, unlike Congress. And so states from both red and blue, Utah, Florida, as well as California, New York, they're all trying to pass laws to protect Americans from AI while still harnessing its real benefits. It's important to know there are some real benefits. So that's what they're afraid of. And they're trying to make sure that those states, red or blue, can't do anything about it. Because the American people are not going to sit by and have this technology jammed down their throats. But maybe, just maybe, a few people can seize enough political control to jam it down nonetheless.
I want to point out that I'm real. You're real. We are live. There is no technological component in any of this. And part of the live experience, which I didn't used to do, this still goes out as a podcast, which people can see here, Beyond Politics podcast. But I like the live experience because it brings in mostly real human beings and some bots. I enjoy the bots as well. And people are generally, I'm getting some of these comments up on the screen, generally saying they're sharing a lot of your concerns. One person is expressing the disbelief that there are still Jewish Democrats. Yeah, man, or lady, or bot. There are a lot of us. But I want to invite people to go ahead and lob questions at former Congressman Carson here. If you have concerns, things on your mind. I have a bunch of concerns. One of the questions that most stood out to me as I was thinking ahead to talking to you and kind of scanning the headlines over the last week were those potentially landmark rulings finding some level of liability and culpability for tech companies when it comes to social media and infinite scroll video platforms. I don't want to call out any of them by name because we may be live streaming on some of them right now. People may be watching us on them. I don't want to diss the hand that feeds us, but are you or are these tech companies eyeing those recent legal decisions, finding some liability for Facebook and a platform that rhymes with GooTube? Are they eyeing this as potentially impacting AI products?
Absolutely, they are. These are landmark rulings because for 30 years, we've had a regime where the social media companies were completely immune from any harms they created. That's unique in American history. You think of every other industry, whether they're good or bad, from tobacco to automobiles to your local HVAC company, the road, construction people. All those people have well-established liability rules. If they harm someone, you can sue them, and then they can pay you compensation for that. 30 years ago, in 1996, Congress made a decision that social media companies would not be liable for the harm they create. That's a congressional action. Looking back on it, it seems like it was a terrible idea at the time. There was a way to promote the internet without giving them blanket immunity. So really, these two landmark cases you mentioned are pursuing these cases not under usual theories. They had to be novel, that they have a product design flaw in them. And it's entirely possible they'll be overturned on appeal, and we'll be back to a world where these social media companies have immunity. That's important for AI because some people are seeking to have those same immunities applied to AI companies. So, for example, if ChatGPT, as we know it has happened, has led young people to self-harm, even suicide, right? You should hold them liable for that. The parents should be able to sue for wrongful death. They would like to have a blanket immunity where if that happens to you, they have no consequences and hence no reason to change their behavior. That's what they're trying to do. So this is a big fight going on in Congress. It will be a big fight over the next few years.
I remember the years when I was a congressional staffer and we were still kind of sorting through the emerging internet. Boy, that makes me sound old as hell. The emerging internet and kind of the rapidly evolving thinking around the Communications Act 1996. And it's very, very hard in a rapidly evolving technology to skate to where the puck is going. I should come up with a better Oklahoma metaphor than that, but I'm sure you could supply one. It's very, very hard to do that. But we've been kind of stuck on Section 230 for 30 years now. Are we at risk here of repeating that exact same mistake all over again?
Exact same mistake. So when they have a preemption, clause, like they've been talking about, it's entirely possible it could preempt all kind of state law actions against them. And there's actually a movement to apply Section 230 to the generative AI companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, XAI. And that would be, again, an even bigger disaster than what happened with the social media platform. So a big fight to ensure that 230 as written doesn't apply to the AI companies, and that we don't pass a wholly new law that exempts them in a way that would be tantamount to Section 230.
I want to offer what back in Congress we might have called a friendly amendment. I've thought of one other industry that's virtually exempt from consumer liability: firearms. It's a deep irony. It's a deep irony to me that you can make that link, that there are two industries that seem to fit like that. I'm not going to comment on that. It's just interesting. Go ahead, please.
Like an observation on that too. Like when people talk about preempting state laws, in the last 65 years, there have been two major efforts to preempt state laws. That's kind of like the driving force of legislation. One was in the 1960s, when cigarette companies came to Congress and said, hey, the states are thinking about putting all these warning labels on tobacco products, and we don't want that. And they actually got the federal government to preclude the states from issuing warning labels on tobacco. And social scientists now tell you that led to 10 million to 20 million excess deaths from cigarette use. The other example is when people tried to regulate subprime mortgages at the states in the early 2000s. Again, the banking industry went to Congress, precluded the states from regulating subprime mortgages, and we know exactly what happened. 2008, right? A global catastrophe occurred. So keeping people immune from liability is, in general, not a good thing. It's like, giving my 2-year-old, a lifetime immunity from like any legal consequences of his actions. I hope he grows up to be a good guy, but if he's a sociopath, right, we'll all pay the price for that. We should have like people subject to generally applicable laws.
Right. It's like giving January 6th insurrectionists total and complete immunity and pardon for anything they might have done wrong. Can't see a way that would ever go badly. By the way, I screwed up a few minutes ago. I mentioned Judaism, and now the chat is all completely dominated, and that seems to have attracted the trolls. And it's like, all right, people, settle down. Let's talk about AI here. Since you were editorializing for a moment ago, I'm going to do the same thing. I think that there is a deeper connection here. I didn't prepare this thought at all, so I'm probably going to screw it up. But I do think there's a deeper connection here between kind of the algorithmic tilt that was at issue in those two legal cases and what I'm experiencing emerging in AI. I use ChatGPT as a pro version. Oh, and we've just lost Congressman Carson. So I'm going to go ahead and extemporize here and do a filibuster, essentially, to see if we can reconnect him back on. I use ChatGPT. I use the pro version. And I do it as part of my work. I do it for research. I do it, you can tell I do it for generating thumbnails because it's a lot better. I'm not a graphic designer. I'm a longtime congressional staffer. I'm a campaign manager. Like, I'm a writer. I don't do graphic design. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. ChatGPT is better at that. Some of the description language that I put into live streams like this, into videos, the fact of the matter is that's largely for search engine optimization. It's basically one robot talking to another robot, right? Like, it's me putting in the language that will help humans, like all of you, hopefully, who are watching this, that will help you find the videos that you want. But that's all being filtered through an algorithm. So the first conversation that's happening is from my robot to YouTube's robot. And so I don't mind using ChatGPT for that. But what's begun to really bug me, what's begun to really get to me, is the ways in which ChatGPT is starting to try to worm its way into my brain and feed me what I want. It's the same thing that you see on YouTube Shorts. Again, no dissing YouTube here because we're on YouTube. But I see it on YouTube Shorts. You see it on Facebook Reels. You see it on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but I guarantee you, any algorithmic-driven video service that has an infinite scroll is doing the same thing. It's trying to pick up on what you want and feed it to you In my case, it's like lame as hell. It's like a lot of chess videos, some outer space stuff, virtually no politics there, because I like to relax when I'm watching short videos. But it's feeding it back to you. And I'm seeing the same thing in AI. It's telling me the moment that I realized, and I'm going to write about this on Substack, the moment that I realized it was when another podcaster, videocaster like me started doing some ChatGPT prep. And ChatGPT told him, "That's a power move you're making there, Mike." I mean, have you ever heard more brown-nosing crap than that? And then it said it to me yesterday. As I was preparing for this show, I was doing some research, and it said, "Here's how you make this into a power move, Matt." Power move? What are you talking about? Have you noticed if you use ChatGPT that it'll begin every answer with, "You're thinking about this exactly the right way"? It's buttering you up, and it makes me suspicious that what it's starting to do is feed me what I want, not necessarily the information that I'm looking for. And the other pernicious effect that I've started to notice is it worms its way into my brain, my thoughts, when I'm starting to try to write something. So I'll go to write an article for Newsweek. And let me tell you something. I struggle. Writing is painful for me. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, then shit, Matt, you picked a terrible profession. And you're right. I did. Kind of stupid, right? But I love it, but it's painful. It's a struggle. It takes me a long time to get my thoughts, and I'll write a first draft and I'll throw it out and I'll tell myself, "Oh my gosh, you're terrible. That was awful. What are you doing?" Like I go through this. Oh, here we go. I filibustered long enough. There he is. Oh, I just inadvertently
Welcome
did
to
a joke there.
Oklahoma. The power went out in Oklahoma. So
you know why? Electricity demand for all the data centers.
that could be. They're all over Oklahoma. Right. So that's good.
Well, I'll tell you what, I know your time is limited here, so I'm going to cut off my filibuster there, which was kind of an extended screed about how AI just feeds you what you want. And I think it's subtly infecting my brain and making my work product worse. I think it's literally shaving points off my IQ. I want to talk about that, but another time. I want to get back to what we were discussing. Talk a little bit, if you would, about the bigger picture here, because there is a version of this where a very cynical person could say, Brad, there's a lot of money in politics. There's a lot of big companies in politics. There's a lot of lobbying in politics. You've been on the receiving end of it. And, companies, PACs, conglomerates, and the entire defense industrial complex is trying to influence you. You're a former undersecretary of the Army, for Pete's sake. Really, is this any different? So tell me what the stakes are here, why we should all care when it comes to the AI regulation fight. What are the risks? Why is this important?
The risks are this. This is the most consequential technology in our lifetime, perhaps in centuries. And the issue is what are the rules going to be that govern it in some way? And that's being fought out in state capitals and in Washington, D.C. right now. And there are a group of people who want no rules at all, or maybe they want a couple of rules, but they generally believe that it would be perfectly fine if there were very limited rules and that families, communities, had to fend on their own. If we have massive job loss, that's just the price of capitalism, right? The creative destruction of the market, and if whole communities are crushed by it and there's political unrest, that those are all things that they just accept as the price of progress. My view is that we can have progress, but making sure that all of us benefit from it and not just a few oligarchs in Silicon Valley. That's really what's at stake here.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a vibrant discussion going on about whether we're seeing the effects of AI in the job market yet. I just had the celebrated economist Mark Zuckerberg on this live stream. The jury is still out, but there's no question that AI is going to have a profound impact. There's no question that we're seeing the early effects in energy costs, whether that's going to continue. Some of the AI companies are even looking to revitalize nuclear because they recognize the impact that they're going to have. What the long-term effect is going to be, jury's still out. The impact on our brains, which that was the subject of my filibuster while we had our gremlin interruption there. I think the jury is still out, but the evidence is coming in pretty fast and hard. But I want to ask you about one slice of this where there's been a lot of concern and a lot of focus, and you're a particular expert. As I mentioned, former Undersecretary for the Army, and the Anthropic story has been very much in the news. How worried, based on your expertise in both AI and the military, should we be about this saga, the designation of Anthropic as a supply chain risk, their refusal to give away some of their safeguards to the DoD? How concerned should we be about AI in the military application?
I think there are three concerns that raise themselves immediately. The first is this whole process where the American government has tried to murder one of its own nation's leading technology providers. Right? Anthropic is an incredible company doing leading edge things. Many people, they think they have the advantage now in AI. This is an instrument of national power. And we have a government that's trying to kill them. So that's not a good thing. On the substance of this question, every American should be concerned. Autonomous weapons. Most Americans I know are not for them. But our military is rushing pretty headlong into having autonomous weapons. And they feel they're in an arms race with other nations, and that may be fair. But that calls out for some kind of international agreement to limit that particular weapon. And on the surveillance question, which is one of the most controversial ones involving Anthropic was absolutely in the right. Right now, the databases that the government has, well, they're kind of hard to manage. There's a lot of friction in trying to actually get private information. LLMs can solve that problem for you. They can interrogate all these databases, be smarter, find inferences and connections that a human couldn't. And so now we're in a world where with LLMs, like Anthropic's or ChatGPT's or Google's or X's, right? You can link all of these together and create personal dossiers on people. That's a dangerous thing.
I know we're approaching the bottom of the hour. We have our next guest coming on, and you have to head out in just a moment. I want to put my finger on perhaps the biggest problem here. And I've saved it for the end, not to sandbag you, because, but I don't want to undersell the scope of the challenge that you've taken on here. Bigger than running as a Democrat in Oklahoma for the U.S. Senate, which you're a brave man, let me tell you. But in that race and in your previous experience as a member of Congress, a blue dog, swing district, I worked exclusively for swing district Democrats. So I know the pressures, especially the fundraising pressures that you and that all of these candidates are under. And we've just seen reporting from the New York Times that 1 in every $5 that entered politics in the 2024 election cycle came from billionaires. We know the headlines that we've seen, $100 million fund that you're up against with your group, buying ads, going after people who might put some kind of regulation on AI. You are up against the most powerful, the best capitalized, the most money awash industry that planet Earth has ever seen. How do you win that fight? And if people agree with you, how can they help?
Sure. Well, they could go to our website and learn more about kind of the super PAC effort that I run, which is protecting people who want reasonable guardrails on AI. And that's at publicfirstaction.us. So publicfirstaction.us. And I think we will win the fight because thanks to a lot of Americans, we've raised more than $50 million. And I often tell people, I have 85% of the people on our side of this question. Can $50 million with 85% of the people beat $200 million with 15%? Well, I'll take our odds on that. But it doesn't happen by accident. People need to get involved. So check out Public First Action. Check out the group I run, the nonprofit I run, which deals in AI policy. It's Americans for Responsible Innovation at ARI.us. And they can read more about the substance of what AI policy should look like in this country.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. And look, I think you're right. I think if we've had a lesson from recent years in politics, it's that having more money is great, but it's not always dispositive. And so I agree with you. I think having more people and more public sentiment, especially as the impacts of AI on all of our lives, our jobs, the ways we interact with the world, and our electricity costs continue to spiral in the years ahead, that's definitely the ground I would rather occupy. Congressman, thanks so much for being on with us.
Thanks, Matt.
All right. Well, I am going to transition us to our next segment, but our next guest isn't quite here yet. So I want to close out just a little bit of the thought that I started at the top, which is I see a link here. We're going to have Cory Johnson on in just a moment. And, you know, the connective tissue, the thread here really is the money. And look, I want to be clear. I know this audience. Shoot, I know the YouTube algorithm. I know that this is not as popular a topic as a straight up Trump slam. You know, we could do any number of things that would probably pick up in the algorithm better as a body slam. But I think this is important. I mean, for some reason, maybe it's because we're just so inured to the fact that politics is awash in money and it's awash in corruption. And the Trump administration is awash in corruption. Maybe that's just become such old hat that we don't even notice it anymore. Like the color of the sky, like it just is, and it doesn't get attention. But I think it should. I really think it should. And I think it's worth the kind of deeper dive, intelligent exercise that Congressman Carson is doing on AI, the money, connecting the dots between what we're experiencing on kind of the blunt end, the business end of politics, the way it plays out in the decisions that our government is making about our well-being, our future, our jobs, our kids' safety, and the influence that's being peddled on the front end. And that's really what this next story is about. It's really about what's happening under the hood in the Trump administration. What is that web? What does it look like? Who's involved in it? Where is the money flowing? And, you know, I'm going to get into this in just a moment as soon as we can get Cory on here. But I think I think we ignore it. I think we sell it short at our peril. I think we kind of we let it get relegated to the realm of like, shrug. Someone's getting rich all the time. I'm convinced after looking at this database that the ProPublica people have put together, looking at the stories that they do amazing work, by the way, right? Like very few people in the mainstream media are doing this kind of thing. I think if we just tell ourselves, you know, this always happens. This kind of thing always happens. We're missing the bigger picture because it's not so much the corruption that we should care about. I mean, I care about corruption, believe me. I care about people lining their pockets at our expense. But I could see the cynical version of that and sort of agree with it. It's like, you know what? You're swapping one set of insiders for another set of insiders, right? Like, you know, do I really care if this person is using their inside connections to make bank and that person isn't? Oh, and look, now we have a new administration. Now that person's making a lot of money. Yeah, there is a version of that that's been going on forever, right? I talk all the time about my favorite, you know, historic series here. It's over my left shoulder. I guess that's screen right for you guys. You know, Robert Caro's LBJ series. Brown and Root made billions and billions of dollars because LBJ steered contracts to them. Steering contracts to favored friends and donors isn't necessarily a big thing. What does become a big thing is the decisions that come out of it. The ways that the government is bent around, our government, the decisions that affect our lives are bent around what these insiders are trying to do. I mean, there's like, you know, there's kind of a low level version of this, right? Like we've seen the stories about people betting on Polymarket and making a lot of money because they happen to know when we'd be bombing. And by the way, I'm gonna try and do this is next level live podcasting. I am going to talk and text Cory at the same time. I can't believe I'm going to try to pull this off. I'm not going to pull this off. It's actually literally impossible to multitask in this way. But look at me doing this. This is like that movie Broadcast News where the Albert Brooks character is able to sing and read at the same time. I am able to live stream. Look at me patting myself on the back. I'm able to live stream and text message our guest at the same time. What I was saying is, bear with me for just a second. What I was saying is that I of course have seen the stories about how people are making money betting on when we're going to bomb Iran. Okay, that's horrifying. The more horrifying version of it, though, is if we bomb based on the bets. And by the way, bless his heart, Derek Thompson actually just did a story about this where, he detailed the fact that, people are making money on Polymarket, right? I was about to cover this with Cory, but I'll just do it. I'll just do it now. That on the morning of February 28th, someone logged onto the prediction market, Polymarket, and made an unusually large bet. And it was a bet that the U.S. would bomb Iran on a specific day. And a few hours later, the bombs landed. And this was part of a $500,000 payday for a user named MAGA My Man. Oh my gosh, what a tool, right? But we don't have any evidence that the decision to bomb was driven by the bet. This seems to be just your basic garden variety war profiteering, right? Like you're an insider. It's like inside trading, right? It's like the movie Wall Street. Blue Horseshoe loves whatever the name of the airplane company was that Charlie Sheen's dad owned, right? But there is some evidence in the other direction because on March 10th, several days into this war that we're fighting with Iran, the journalist Emmanuel Fabian reported that a warhead launched from Iran struck a site outside Jerusalem. On Polymarket, users had placed bets on the precise location of missile strikes on that day. And so that article from Emmanuel Fabian was therefore poised to determine payouts of $14 million in betting. And as the Atlantic's Charlie Warzel reported, this is all via Derek Thompson, bettors reached out to Fabian and encouraged him to rewrite his story to produce the outcome that they'd bet on. Others threatened to make his life miserable. So there's kind of a leading indicator right there that people are looking to influence the media, what facts are reported, what reality is reported to fit their betting. And it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from there. Just like a very, very small move from there to, hey, I'm Don Jr. Hey, Dad, I just bet that we would bomb tomorrow. And Don getting on the phone, we got to bomb tomorrow. That's the next level of corruption that I think we should all be worried about. And I'll just say, by the way, because I am totally openly stalling a little bit here because, yes, thank you, Jim. I can do it because I really wanted to get Cory on here. He's amazing. He's a great reporter. This database is fascinating. But I mean, look, I agree with the Cynthia Rice that obviously the sports betting sites need to be regulated. You're totally right. Right? You shouldn't be betting on the government you work in. And there's some emerging regulation. There's a state law proposed in California. I was just talking about the states being the laboratories of innovation for democracy. Well, we're seeing some of that. But I think it goes deeper. I think it goes even deeper than that. Because what I think this ProPublica database reveals is it's not just the garden variety web of money and corruption. It's the bending of decisions around financial benefit and decisions that have deep consequences, right? So it's not just like the documents showing that senior executive branch officials, including Attorney General Pam Bondi, made well-timed securities trades, selling stocks just before the markets plunged. It's not just that we just had a story earlier this week about essentially short selling, selling oil right before Trump made an announcement that they were suspending bombing, or, basically something that, like, he's been driven by markets and market manipulation the whole time, right? And so he put out a tweet and, that was suggesting that things were going to wind down with Iran. And right before that, someone short sold a whole bunch of oil. And so they sold at a high price. It's basically the plot of Trading Places, right? They basically, Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy did. And again, it begs this deep question of what's the tail and what's the dog? What's driving what? Now, I know Cynthia thinks that Putin and Bibi are co-running the U.S. Yeah, I guess they're strongly influential. I'd throw in some other forces too. We shouldn't just limit ourselves. But look, I mean, that's the concern that I wanted to get into here with Cory is, what do we know about the extent to which decisions about our defense, what we regulate, the financial sector, to what extent are decisions being driven not by like who are the winners and losers, what contractor is going to get to build Golden Dome. That's important. Believe me. I mean, he starts out his story by talking about the thousands of companies jockeying for money from the Defense Department. Oh my gosh, it's Cory. Hey, Cory, I am on the live stream right now, and you are going to join. I believe it's on your calendar. Exclamation point. Alexis Stevens set it up. All right, there you go. By the way, you all just got to get an insight into my life and personality that you never wanted. Yes, I dictate texts. It is a source of great hilarity among my friends and my family, because I always screw it up. I don't bother to double check that I've spelled things correctly. So Siri commits various barbarisms of what I've said. But anyway, I dictate texts and it's hilarious. And that's also a reason that I am a very long texter. But suffice it to say, okay, Cory's on the way. So there we go. So we will try to do the sprint version of this conversation as soon as he shows up. But that's really what I wanted to set up. Is that exact question. And what I'd like to do also is I'd like to prompt all of you who have hung on with me through this kind of extended rant period as we wait for our guest to do what Surrender Monkey did. This comment is, I'm betting on Trump not being able to end his war. Well, I would if it wasn't going to cost me £2 million just to bribe Iran for oil tanker safety. I'd like you to bring your questions, because I've now given you the extended setup on what we're going to get into here. And I'd like you to think of the questions that you have for Cory here. I'll tell you right now in advance that some of what I was going to hit him with is, what did you find? They looked at more than 3,000 financial disclosures. What's buried in there? And here we go. Let's bring him on right now with no further ado, and a really great buildup. Cory, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Apologies for the tardy entry.
No worries. Listen, you are in a really luminous class of people who have been bitten by schedule problems and tech gremlins. I had Jamie Harrison, my old friend from the Hill, former DNC chairman, on this show a few weeks ago, and my audio completely went out, and I left him to host my show and vamp for 10 minutes while I went and tried to fix it. So you are in good stead. You're in great standing. Well, while we were building up to your appearance, I tried to set up what I wanted to get into with you. I gave sort of my rundown of what's on my mind. I want to talk a little bit about this incredible database that you set up. You did the shoe leather reporting. You went through the disclosures that these days we're all so lazy. We would just ask ChatGPT to do it. You went through these documents. You put together the connections. Just tell us, if you wouldn't mind, because we're so used to revolving door stories, but this seems different. You looked at more than 3,000 financial disclosures. What's the most revealing thing you found that you hope people will kind of remember and take away from this? What really stuck with you?
Well, first, I can't take full credit for the work of the team. There was a nice, really group of talented data specialists who have been poring over, gathering and amassing this data for months. I got brought in as the data was piling up, and they just needed someone to kind of go through it to try to figure out what stories were there. And let me just tell you, we're still going through that data. Like there is tremendous amount of information and leads and questions that this data is posing. But I'll give you a couple things really quick. You're right. Revolving door, there's nothing new about revolving doors, and there's nothing new about potential conflicts of interest. But what is significant, according to the experts, is that experts are saying they've never seen the type of scale, and they've never seen these kind of conflicts of interest combined with the erosion of guardrails. It wasn't just that the Trump administration appointed so many people who have, deep connections with the industries that they oversee. The Trump administration also on day one planted a flag that ethics was going to take a back seat, and they got rid of many of the people whose jobs it is to watchdog these ethics and to bring cases, investigate conflicts, and hold the government to some account. So you got a perfect storm, if you will, of large numbers of people who have some conflicts that experts say would have prevented them from even being confirmed in previous administrations. And then you have literally no police on the beat who can double check and hold these people accountable. Now, I shouldn't say no, but drastically reduced. Drastically reduced. There is fear. I've talked to some current as well as former inspector generals who are saying pretty shocking things about how many complaints are just kind of being put in a bucket or in the desk and not touched, because out of fear that if you actually adequately investigate this complaint, that you can get fired the next day. This is like an unprecedented moment in the American, well, I shouldn't say unprecedented. I should say, at least in modern history, we have not seen a set of circumstances conspiring in this way in a very long time. Historians say you got to go back to the Gilded Age, or maybe even right after the Civil War, to get this level of inattention to the law and the rules.
One of the reasons I love having you and your ProPublica colleagues on this show is that I get to ask my favorite question of investigative journalists, because I always picture the All the President's Men Library of Congress scene where you're just going through files, you're just pounding through information. And I always picture a moment where you find something and you just go, damn, what is this? Is there a moment like that that stands out for you in putting together this database?
Multiple moments, many moments. One moment that I call them aha moments. Like one of my
that's more elegant than my version. Yeah,
aha moments or holy moments was when I was going through the data. And I came across Todd Blanche's name. Todd Blanche was President Trump's private attorney in those New York criminal cases, who he appointed to be the second most powerful person at the Justice Department. And I mean, Mr. Blanche is knee deep in pretty much everything that's, in the news, like from the Epstein files to questions about the overreach in terms of the immigration enforcement, you name it, the Justice Department is involved, and Mr. Blanche is somewhere with his hands in the middle of it as well. And so when I was looking through his personal disclosures, I noticed that he owned quite a bit of crypto. He had, arguably, between 150 to maybe 500,000 in crypto holdings. And that was interesting to me because I recalled that he played a key role in shutting down crypto enforcement. And so I started to look back at the timeline and looked at what he pledged to do in his ethics agreement. His ethics said, oh yeah, I am going to divest, and but until I divest from this crypto, I'm not going to do anything that's going to impact or could impact, all of that. And yet within a few weeks after signing it, he literally shut down all crypto enforcement and said that the Justice Department was going to join President Trump's team, his crypto team that was going to establish policies that would make America the leading place of crypto in the world and so forth, which is an interesting policy choice for a law enforcer, right? The highest law enforcer of the land. And so when I looked at that and I looked at the timeline, he had not gotten rid of his crypto at the point that he made that decision. And so the cool thing about data is you can actually look at crypto sales and trading. And we saw that from the date that he made that decision until months later when he finally got rid of it, and he got rid of it by claiming that he gave it as a gift to his adult children, which is something else that's a little bizarre. Experts say that giving stuff over to your family members is usually a no-no. But when we looked at it, the value of his crypto drastically went up in the aftermath, which meant by the time he turned it over, he actually had plumped up the value of his crypto. And so when we asked the experts were aghast. They were like, this is a clear cut. This is what the laws were written to try to prevent. And so in the aftermath of that story, there have been investigations, demanded 6 of the high-ranking Democratic senators in the Senate have sent letters to Blanche asking that he turn over documents related to these transactions. I mean, and so that was kind of an aha moment. You would think, again, this is not to cast any undue aspersions or anything, but you would think that the lawyer at the Justice Department would know the law and would pledge, he pledged not to do anything and so forth. And so that was the one. There's been several others, but that was the one that immediately, slapped me across the forehead and made me say, holy crap.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that one up, because what I was talking about in the run up to you jumping on was my concern that what separates what you've unearthed from garden variety revolving door, this set of cronies is getting benefits and contracts and millions and billions in government dollars, and now this set is getting it. What separates what you found from that is the potential that these kinds of financial incentives and cross currents that you've unearthed are driving decisions that impact the administration of law, policy, big decisions that affect all of us. And I'll just build on your example for a moment. Almost a year ago, I wrote an article on my Substack, Worth Knowing, with Matt Robeson, which I called Shutdown, Corruption, Crime, and a Mysterious Agency Shutdown. And I brought up 2 odd news stories that happened to come up back to back and that tie very much to your Todd Blanche story. One is the Justice Department doing away with the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, which stunned its employees. And it's a Reagan-era unit that takes down transnational crime, drug and human trafficking networks, and would essentially have purview over a lot of what cryptocurrency is used for.
Yes.
And at the exact same moment, in the same week, New York Times story from Eric Lipton and David Yaffe-Bellany. Trump's son's deals on 3 continents directly benefit the president. Yeah, well, that's a dog bites man story these days. But the quote I have here is: a contest of sorts has played out across Europe, the US, and the Middle East in recent days as President Trump's 2 older sons have pursued a blitz of family money-making ventures, capitalizing on their father's name and power. And I go on to say that the companies that they're involved with include a Cayman Islands-based crypto company that was fined $45 million by the SEC in 2023 and agreed to leave the U.S. marketplace for violating federal securities law. And I could go on. The upshot is, as you unearthed here, Todd Blanche is hands deep in decisions to do away with law enforcement that would otherwise oversee crypto. And he is knee deep in crypto, and the spirals of this into other areas, other people with ties within the Trump administration, that industry just goes on and on and on. And I want to get to an audience question here from Surrender Monkey. I hope that's a Simpsons reference. I hope that's bonjour. Anyway, Surrender Monkey says, so we know Trump isn't smart enough to manipulate this. Who does Cory think is pulling the strings? Who is there kind of like an organizing person behind this, all of this?
So let me just say, I have not found the genie or the wizard behind the curtain pulling the strings. And, I'm not opposed to discovering that if it does indeed exist. I think that, but separate from that, though, I think that there are real tangible reasons why people can do these things that don't necessarily require a hidden hand. If, when we looked at this data, there were well over 200 appointees who owned some sort of crypto. Just using crypto as an example. And we're talking their crypto ownership went into the hundreds of millions in terms of what it's worth. And so if you have that level of investment, then, and there's no real enforcement of the laws, then what's going to stop you from crossing the line to benefit yourself? Like, you don't have to be in a secret meeting where people are doling out the orders to you wanting to go take some for yourself. Now, again, I'm not going so far to allege that that is indeed happening, but I'm saying that some of this stuff is really doesn't take a grand conspiracy. These are real human factors, which is the reason why you want to have rigorous enforcement and rigorous guardrails to make sure that if it's a bad actor or if it's a scheme, that it's getting spotted out and rooted out, in real time.
You alluded a moment ago to the fact that you're still discovering connections, data, information in this trove that you've put together. And I don't want to put you in a position, because you are a fact-based investigative reporter, I don't want to put you in the position of speculating. But I do want to follow up on where you're most suspicious, because we keep seeing stories emerge. The Financial Times just had a story about how Pete Hegseth's financial broker was inquiring about possible multi-million-dollar investments in major defense companies just ahead of the war. And I talked a little bit right before you came on about what we're finding out about the activity going on Polymarket, and the potential that not only are people sort of war profiteering off of insider information, kind of the government equivalent of insider trading.
Yes.
But there's also the potential now that decisions are being driven by actors who may have financial interests in certain outcomes with certain timing. So given all of that, and given what you're looking at and what you can see that the rest of us can't see, what are you most suspicious about that we may not be seeing yet?
Well, I think, to not scoop myself on some
right, don't do that.
stories, what I would say is I think, especially given the erosion with the watchdogs, one of the reasons why we decided to publish this data is so everybody could get in on looking at these people and checking to see if there's some weird stuff. And I would just say that the government agencies have a ton of money that they are administering and operating with on a daily basis. And so anywhere where policy is meeting contracts, it's going to be something that should get some scrutiny, because like I said, there is little to no guardrails around how that money is going to be doled out and overseen. And so anything that's dealing with major contracts, major finance within the government should definitely be a yellow flag, if not a red flag, for deeper inquiry. You mentioned Polymarket and some of these prediction markets too. I think that is definitely an area that deserves some deeper inquiry. I know Polymarket is one of the least transparent, or at least over the years have been least transparent, and have been banned from operating in the U.S. For several years, until the Trump administration fought to get them back online with U.S. Citizens. And so those things you want to definitely keep your eye on, because and I would just say broadly, any place where the transparency isn't that great, but the money might be, is definitely an area you want to keep your eye on. And we hope, ProPublica, all of us, we hope that citizens would really dive into the data, and because it's a big government, we can't all do it ourselves. And so we want citizens to look at this information and see if they can connect dots that we might have missed.
That is a great tip. And I just put the link to the story, which has embedded in it the link to the database. So I figured people would want to read the story, the surrounding story from you and your colleagues there, and be able to dive into the database themselves. So I'm going to pop that right back up on the screen right now. People can also just Google. I hear Google works. It's amazing. So people can search for you, your name, and this story, and they can find you and all of your other incredible work, which I do want to someday ask you about.
Sure.
But I think what I'm going to do, since I've kept you on past the top of the hour, and you are busy and you are working on this in real time right now, is I think I'm going to move to wrap up right about now. And I would love, when you do your next edition of this, when you're ready to not scoop yourself and you've got the scoop and you've already gone to print, I'd love to have you back and talk more about this. I agree with the commenters who are saying there is much more to come here. Jim Williams saying this administration will fall like a house of cards. Write that down. Well, I hope you're right, Jim. I hope it falls for the right reasons through the work of investigative journalists like Cory, who are putting the pieces together on the kind of corruption that all people, regardless of their political affiliations, should be against. Okay, before I let you go, anything that you would like to tip people off to, either upcoming things to keep an eye out for, or if people find connections and tips that they want to shoot your way, is there a good way for them to do that?
Well, I appreciate you sharing the link. I think there's a link on that link where people can get in touch with us. If not that, on the actual database where they can get in touch with us if they find things. I am honored to have this conversation with you. I'm sorry that I missed a little bit of it, but we will make that up in the future for sure. But I appreciate having the opportunity to share our work with you and your audience. And I hope to be able to come back soon with more important pieces of information. I think, everybody is playing a role, and the role that you're playing and the role that others are playing is just as critical as the work that we're doing. So we appreciate the support.
I thank you so much. And I think that's actually a great bridge to exit on, because not only are people saying, thank you and noting the fact that real journalism still exists, but also, I want to address a point that Surrender Monkey brings up. Thank you, by the way, for being such an active chatter today. We really thrive on that and we appreciate it. And this person is saying, I can't believe there aren't more people here with a chance to pick the brains of investigative journalists. Well, I agree with that. I just want to assure people that nowadays, with audiences being so fractured, sometimes these live streams get thousands and thousands of people. Sometimes they don't. But we get this out through multiple channels. It goes out in my top-rated podcast. It goes out live. It goes out on my own YouTube channel, which I urge people to subscribe to. Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson. It's the same thing on my Substack, and people will get the clips there. So this is going to go out in multiple forms and hopefully drive more people back to give tips, to dive into the database like Cory was suggesting, give him and the rest of his team more fuel to work with. And we will continue the conversation next time. So I hope people will come back for that. And in the meantime, and until next week, everyone out there, stay safe, be well. We'll see everybody soon. Take care.